This show is proudly brought to you by Enterprise Fitness, Melbourne's premier personal training studio. Hey, it's Maximus Mark, and welcome to the show that punches you in the face with information, but in a good way. And today's guest is Andre Benoit. We're going to be talking with Andre about his career, from being in the Winter Games as an athlete in luge, to coaching with Charles Poliquin, to now opening up his own facility. But before we get into that, just a quick announcement. I have exactly 2 spots left for my internship course coming up this November. It's on the 14th, 15th, and 16th, and it's at my facility, Enterprise Fitness in Melbourne. You can visit the website, which is www.enterprisefitness.com, and just click on the events tabs, which is on the right-hand side at the top, and down will come a column called internship. Click on that and full details are there. I hope you guys really enjoy the podcast with Andre, and I'll speak to you on the other side. Andre Benoit is a 23-year veteran in the strength and conditioning business for Olympic athletes, mums, CEOs, and young aspiring athletes alike. Andre participated in the 88 and 92 Olympics in the sport of luge. During his career, Andre made a commitment to expand his knowledge in physical education. After his university degree in physical education, he has pursued and continuing education, attending seminars and internships with world-renowned coaches such as Paul Chek and Charles Poliquin. Andre has been working with Charles Poliquin since 1989, helping with program design, coaching pro athletes, and developing courses. Andre was the head course conductor for the Poliquin International Certification Program from 2007 to 2013. His position also enabled him to teach the latest training systems in short and long-term program design for the general population and high-performance athletes to personal trainers and strength coaches in over 8 countries around the world. Through his work with Charles and his own enterprise, Andre had the great opportunity to train elite hockey athletes such as Al McInnes, Gary Roberts, and Wade Ridden, to name a few. He was also the strength coach for the men's national alpine ski team, Canadian luge team, skeleton, and bobsled Canada, as well as the athletes on the Canadian speed skating team, NFL football, CFL, and the track and field athletes. Andre is the co-founder with his wife, Susan Benoit, of the Canadian Centre for Strength and Conditioning in Alberta, Canada. So it's with great pleasure that we bring to you today's podcast. So welcome to the show, Andre. It's an absolute pleasure to interview you today. You've trained some of the best in the world. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Awesome. So we've got some good questions to ask you. So first, before we really get into the meat and veg of it, tell us, how did Andre Benoit become Andre Benoit? How did you become strength coach extraordinaire?
It's all actually because of Charles Poliquin. Because before I met him, I was at the University of Calgary. I was doing my phys ed degree, and I was also studying to be a pilot, helicopter pilot. And I made the national luge team in 1984. And I was trained the wrong way, from 1984 to 88. 1988, Charles came in. And then I was supposed to have a surgery for my shoulder because I had chronic pain, and I had a severe spondylolisthesis on my L4. And I was supposed to get my vertebrae fused before my next season of luge. And Charles came in, did a very basic assessment, and basically in a month solved my shoulder problem, and in 2 months my back problem, no more back pain, just with strength training. And that's when I said, this guy knows something that other people do not know. And I became his assistant in 1989, and history was then. Like, it was just it all started because I told him, I said, you should get an assistant to help you. I told Charles you should get an assistant to help you do all the programs and everything. And he goes, well, nobody wants to do this. And he goes, do you want to do it? I said, sure, I'll do it. And it just started like that. And then here I am, 26 years later, strength coach. And I still don't have my flying license.
So you were Charles's first assistant?
I was, yeah.
So
in Calgary in '88, like, he had an assistant in Montreal before that, but because he moved in Calgary, and I guess I was his first one here.
This is an interesting question because, I mean, obviously you've seen, I suppose, Poliquin and Charles get more popular, obviously, in the last couple of years to exploding to where the Poliquin, I suppose, business is now. In terms of, when you started with Charles all those years ago, in terms of training methodology, do you think the training methodology is the same as it was in the 80s as it is today, or do you think that's also developed?
What do you mean by training methodology? The system we use?
Yeah, systems that you use, techniques that you use to coach.
The system we use, they're basically the same. There's not much that's changed. A few were added on, but to be honest, since the 70s, nothing was invented. Like I always tell people, I used to tell people in class, like they used to ask me, what book should I read? What's the best book? What's the best book I read on training? I said, if you want to read the most up-to-date training book, buy any book that was written before 1970. After that, it's kind of a regurgitation of what was already done. And when Charles came in, like right now, you have the different system that he talks about. For us as athlete, it was method A to method. I think it was G was the last one. So it was A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then he would tell us what method to use. And then he would alternate those things from one to the next.
Right.
So that's why sometimes people ask me, well, what do you think of this method? I'm like, I don't know. And then I say, explain it to me. And like, oh, okay. So in my head, that's method F, That's, I've known them from different, I'm better now. But at the beginning when I started to teach for Charles, I was like, what are they talking about?
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to kind of start with that and kind of get your view on that, because I know a lot of the time there's probably new strength coaches and new trainers on the line who are listening to this call, and they're kind of always searching for the next greatest thing or the next biggest, program of technique, or, whether it's a 4-time day split or whatever the case may be. But really, the methods haven't changed since the 70s. What worked then still works today.
No, and I'm talking more here about strength or hypertrophy system. They haven't changed much.
Yeah.
Like the guys that were bodybuilders in the 60s and 70s, they knew what they were doing. They learned through trial and error, but they knew what they were doing. And same thing with the athletes at the Eastern Bloc. A lot of good stuff came out of there because they had the budget to study and study again, and so that's why probably most of the best systems comes from the Eastern Bloc's countries.
Okay. So what was it like competing at the Winter Games?
It was. My first Olympics in '88 in Calgary was a bit surreal because we were home, and I remember walking in the opening ceremonies, and you're the last country coming in, and people, they just go crazy. And it's the first time I was in a stadium with so many people and screaming. So it was pretty surreal, especially for me. It was just I'm one of the few guys that made the Olympics within 4 years. That's mostly because of my background, and I attribute all that because of judo and gymnastics. But just walking the stadium and then competing also was quite fantastic, because in the luge track, when we were training for the Olympics, in front of us is a big grass area, and the day of the Olympics, that grass area was full of people. We could not see any grass at all. So that was kind of a bit of unnerving, because even though you did your visualization, they talked about visualization of the race and everything. For me, that was 4, 5, 6 times more people than I visualized.
Wow.
So it was it was great. It's a great experience. I'll never. And then 1992 in Albertville was also very good as far as experience. We didn't have as good results, even though we had on the second run, we had the first run. Sorry, we had the fastest start, but the end result wasn't as good. So we finished 10th in '88 and 14th only in 1992. But it was still a good experience. In
an event like luge, I know that you've taught me personally. You talk about a lot of neck training. Can you just elaborate on why the neck, especially in sports like luge and even like F1 racing, why that's particularly important?
Yeah, actually it's a good thing you mentioned that, because it's not just in luge, but any F1 or I know in Australia NASCAR is not that big, but NASCAR, they always turn the same way. It's a lot of G-force. So it's for luge, for example, when you go into a curve, the G-force will go from 1 to up to 6. So it's 6 times the weight of your head you have to support. Now, it's not for long. It's not like for 10 seconds. It's a fraction of a second, but it's still, when you do 4 or 5 curves in a row with 4 to 6 Gs in the curve, it shows up after 4 or 5 runs. It shows up, and you have to have a solid neck, to the point where at the beginning of the season, a lot of athletes have headaches because the vibration, just forget about the G-force, just the vibration of the track. You have to hold your head. And just that will sometimes give you your headache. And then when we started doing a lot of neck training with Charles, we would the beginning of the season. Like I remember in 1989, when the first week of training, I remember not having any headache, and we were all like the people who did the training as Charles asked to do it. We were all saying, "Oh my goodness, there's no headache this year. It's awesome."
So there's an interesting story. I remember you telling a class about how you actually got something about you got selected from the team. Charles wrote a program, and he knew that you were one of the only ones who did it because you were really fatigued. Or do you want to elaborate on that one?
But that was cluster training. Okay. And yeah, that was a bit of a shock to the system. So cluster training, basically, it's you're lifting an intensity of maybe 90% of your 1 RM instead of doing it for 18 reps, you do it for about 25 reps total. So that was and it attacks your nervous system quite a bit. And it was 4 of us actually, and the reason why he knew we did it is because we were at the Olympic Oval getting ready to do start training, and it was myself, my doubles partner, Bob Gasper. There was Harrington Telford, who used to do singles, and then Dan Dahl, who was on a different doubles team. Anyway, and I remember we were sitting down, and it's been a while since we started doing the cluster training, and we were sitting down, and my hand was shaking, and I thought I was starting to have Parkinson because it was shaking nonstop, like for the last 2 days. And Harrington Telford, actually was probably he was a very mean athlete if you did not know him, and he was a tough bastard. I don't know if I can say that online.
You can say whatever you want. Swear as much as you like. It's all good.
Okay. Yeah. So he was a tough bastard, and he was shaking and kind of emotionally unstable. And I'm looking at my hand. He goes, "Man," he goes, "I've been shaking like this for 3 days. Something wrong with us, man." He goes, "There's something going on." And I'm thinking in my head, and then we were starting to not do as well in training. And I said, if Charles sees us, he's gonna blow a fuse for sure, you know. And as I'm saying this, because we haven't seen him for 20 some days, and as I say this, I see these little feet coming up, and I'm like, oh my goodness, it's Charles. And sure enough, it was Charles, and we're looking at him, and he's looking at us, and I'm just waiting to get, you know, screamed at in some way, like, not just like Charles getting mad at us for not training. And also he goes, "Hey, how long have you been shaking like this?" And then Telford goes, 3 days, man. He goes, "What's wrong?" And then Charles starts laughing, and he goes, okay, you guys, you need some time off. And then he sees at the other end of the training room, the other guys, the 8 or other guys on the team that are doing a warm up, and they're laughing and they're happy. And because I remember thinking, how can they warm up? Like, we were dead. Like, the 4 of us, we were lethargic, had no energy. And then Charles, he lost it on them. And then he told them, he goes, "You have not been doing this training properly." And then this one guy, Chris, started talking back to Charles, which is not something you did at the time. And Charles, you know, basically told him to shut up. And he says, if you would be training properly, you would be like them. Okay, you cannot, because you become, doing cluster training, if you do it too long, you become excessively lethargic, a little bit depressed, and you get discouraged, and because it totally attacks your nervous system. And that's how Charles knew we did it, and they didn't do it. So we had 5 days off to recover from that training, and then those guys, they got Charles. We ran out of it. He told us to leave, and we were halfway dressed in our luge equipment, and I remember just picking up my stuff and walking out halfway dressed with my luge stuff, and I was going to change outside because the head coach was on the ice, and I'm sure he was going to say, no, let them do start first, and then they leave. And we, all four of us, we just want to get the hell out of there because it was it was painful. But the moral of the story, just if you're trained by someone who cares about how well you do, well, you better do it properly.
Yeah. And just that story kind of reminds me of, I remember something that Charles said is that essentially in your training, you want to kill people to an extent, but then let them recover. Kill them, let them recover. In that, would you agree when you were getting ready for the Olympics that that was kind of the way you guys trained? Or?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like it was, if it was not, he gave us very, very hard training programs, but we always had the time to recover. That's something I've learned with Charles, that training is, you do better, you get better at it when you train and recover properly. So if you train hard, you have to rest hard. There's different system. There's always the art of overtraining the athlete a little bit, but then you do your taper to have your recovery and overcompensate.
And it's probably one of the biggest things I've learned from you personally. I remember when I started training with you, it was like, no, we're only training 4 days a week, and I made some of my best gains training with you. So, yeah. Very good. Let's move on to some of the clientele or athletes that you've coached. Who would you say out of, what client or athlete are you most proud of coaching, and why?
The most proud of having coached are the ones that were not gifted. Look, I had two athletes, and specifically like Lindsay Alcock, she was on the skeleton team, and Reagan Lausier, she was on the luge team, and those two were not gifted as far. They didn't have the genes to be, great athletes, but they worked super hard. Like they really, really worked hard. They didn't have the nervous system that usually you would like to see with an athlete. But for example, with Lindsay, she worked super hard, and in skeleton, I don't know if people are familiar, but they are basically bending over on their hands on their sled, and they run, and they have to dive into their sled, and then they take off. So with her, she at 1 year, the year after I started training her, she held 4 start record out of 5 tracks in the world. Yeah. And Regan, she was also, again, nervous system really slow, but a super hard worker. Like I remember 1 year I kept her from being on the national team because she couldn't do chin-ups. And there's a high correlation between chin-ups, power clean, and the luge start. And I thought she truly hated me. She told me verbally that she hated my guts and she hated me. But I trained her hard, and I said, Reagan, either this is going to kill you or it's going to make you. And obviously she stuck with training, and she was the first woman to win a medal at a World Cup from the cane history. And then at the Olympics, she did fantastic. She had the best ever results at the 2000 Olympic Games in Salt Lake City. And that was just fantastic. For me, that was because it's something that it was challenging for me as a coach to make them better, because I had to work with athletes that had disadvantages. But they did really, really well. And, I'll take some of the credit for that. But I think those two girls were determined, and they had a lot of adversity.
Wow. Because
since they were not always the best at the beginning, they had big hurdles to jump over, and they did this maybe a bit more so Regan than Lindsay, because once Lindsay started doing fast start, because if you have a fast start in luge or a skeleton, that's a big advantage. So 1/10 at the start is 3/10 at the finish for the same run. So if you're 1/10 of a second behind at the start, and your opponent as 1/10 ahead of you, well, at the finish you will be 3/10 behind.
So it's very.
So it's a big for us. It's a huge time. I know it's not much, 0.3 of a second. I think it's a blink of an eye, but it's for us is long. 0.3 of a second is like wow.
That'd be the difference between gold and not even getting a medal.
Gold and 0.3 is gold and probably 7th or 8th place.
Yeah. And you've programmed and trained a number of athletes across quite a variety of sports. What sport or event do you most like programming for?
Well, the easier one to program for a winter sport because the season is set, and all the sliding sport, like for example, bobsleigh, skeleton. Luge, even like alpine ski. Those are the sport that are the easier one to program for because the season starts at this one date and it's ends at the end of the date. Judo was the one that I hated the most.
Why do you hate judo?
Because they have competition every freaking, and it seems like all competitions are important. There's very few that like when I was coaching my judo guys. I would say, okay, tell me what competition is, it doesn't matter if you do well or not. So they would give me maybe three competition out of 15. I was like, oh my goodness. So it's really hard because you have to make them peak, and you can only peak so many times in a year. You can't peak every second week, So it was really hard. Like you have to sit down and you write your year periodization, and your eraser is your best friend because whatever you write, you're going to erase and then change it because something happened, an injury in the shoulder, or they pulled their knee, or they hurt their knee, or they pull a hamstring, or something happens. There's a lot of factors in judo. That's a lot of work,
right?
For sure.
So you'd say judo is the hardest one, and the winter sports are preferable because the seasons are set.
Yeah.
Okay.
But from what I coach, like I know tennis is also very difficult because they think they have to perform every single competition. I've had one athlete, but it was not really high performance. But I've had friends who were, working with tennis people, and are also runners. Runners can be also difficult.
Well, why do you think runners are so difficult?
If you have a long distance runner, it's the same thing. If they don't, it's not difficult as far as periodization for the year. It's just make them understand that running is not end all and be all. If you want to, I was able to convince of all people, triathletes, to do more strength training because I told them at the end of the day, I said, what is the one factor that will address your how fast you run. So they say, well, there's two things. There's your stride and your frequency. I said, okay, but what's the one factor that will address both? And they always come up saying, well, it's strength. So there you go. So the stronger you are, obviously you have to look at the sport, but the stronger you are, the faster you'll run because you either increase your stride length or your frequency with that. So. And I'm taking for granted here, like their technique is good. They don't need the first thing you need to know is know how to run, and then once that is learned, then your strength will make a big difference.
And is there any, sport or program that you're just like, oh, I'm so glad I never have to program for that athlete or for that sport again? Would you say it's judo in that case, or is there one that just is like, I'd never want to see that kind of personality type again?
Okay, personality, the athlete or the sport?
Well,
two different things.
The personality, because what I suppose I'm getting at is with each sport there is a personality type that goes along with that. Yes.
Yeah, but I would say that the easiest athlete I've had, I had to coach. Were amateur athlete in general. They're easy to coach because their motivation, it's an inner motivation. It's from them and they want to do good. There's no, in all the sport I've coached amateur sport, I coached, like there was no money. Like I never really coached anybody in track and field to a level where they would make, millions of dollars from sponsorship. The other group that I liked to coach was hockey. The hockey players in Canada they're in the vast majority of the case are good. They're really good.
Well,
The
one thing.
one,
Sorry.
the one that I least liked would be, in general. Again, there's an exception, but in general, was NFL football in the States.
Okay, why the NFL? Just too many contracts, too many people.
Well, because most of the guys, they come in with their groupies, eh? They come in, like, I remember at Charles Gyms would have these guys, they would come in, they have all their posse coming in. I was like, are you kidding me here? And then they come in, they want to watch their guy train. And then, so I would kick him out, and then you get in arguments with the manager, and then to the point where I remember Charles says, okay, Charles took over, he says, this is it. He talked to the athlete, says, no more, you come in, you train, you get out.
Yeah.
If you have your entourage coming in, they can wait outside. That's so.
Okay, cool.
But again, there's some really, really good NFL football players that I coached, but some were difficult. And actually, you know what? I retract this. One of the worst experience I've had was with actors for Cool Running. I remember they were coming in there, and it was just like, except for one. There's this one guy who was super nice. He's the guy who actually, the actor who he makes the star stumble in the race there at the beginning. And the reason why they're doing Bob Seale is because that one guy, the rich guy. And then the other ones sometimes like, oh my goodness, this is not something I would like to do again. Like this, if there's one thing I wouldn't mind not doing again, it's coaching actors.
Okay. Good to know.
I mean, I would do it, but it's just like I'd be more ready now.
Yeah.
And I would put, when I would talk to the producer, I would say, this is the rules, and that's it.
Yeah.
If they break that rule,
you probably get bigger egos now as well, though. So it'd be experience and bigger egos would kind of match each other and still be a pain.
Yeah.
Hey? One of the things that I've learned from you firsthand, I think we did about 12 months of programming together, is that you got my hips in probably the best shape they've ever been in. Obviously, I had a very big discrepancy between my left and right side. And, you saw that when I did a program with you, you saw that. And essentially, when you do have an athlete or a client, whatever the case may be, before putting pen to paper and writing them a program, what is the first thing that you would consider?
Well, first of all, I always sit down with them and I always ask their goals. Because the thing is, I always do my own evaluation. So as you know now, my first evaluation is I look at people walk. So when they walk toward me, or for example, for you, I would see you walk in the gym and I'd say, okay, I can see this, I can see that. And it's the best thing because you don't know you're being evaluated. So for my clients, I always do that type of evaluation. And then I sit down with them and I go, okay, so what's your goals? And then I look how precise they are with it or how vague they are with it. So if the more vague they are, then you're saying, okay, they don't really know exactly where they're going. So it's going to be my responsibility to maybe guide them or ask them questions to see exactly where they want to go. And so that's very important. I also ask, the second thing is how often can they realistically train? Because a lot of people, they tell you, oh yeah, I'll train 6 days a week. Yeah, well, that's what you want. But how many days a week you can that's the reality of things, and that's what I look at. And the amount of time I have with them. So if they give me a month or 6 months or a year, that will change. It will change how I look at them, how I write the program for them, and so on. So that's what I will look at, basically, goals. And then obviously the structural balance I will do with them. I look at that.
Let's say theoretically someone comes back, they're quite advanced in their training, like they've been training a good number of years, their structural balance is pretty good. What would you then consider?
I look at how they trained for the last 6 months. That's very important. I think that's something, and even if I can have a year, it's even better. Because what happened is that one thing I noticed for people that are actually training themselves or even personal trainer that come and see me or strength coach that come and see me, what I notice is that I've noticed this about 15 years ago is that even I'm guilty of it too, is we're comfortable with familiarity. So everybody likes to use a certain amount of training system, and they rarely deviate from that. And the reason why is because you start with those systems, and then you see this amount of strength gain or hypertrophy gain, and you say, wow, this works really well. Mm. But as you know, after a few years of that, then your body adapts to system as much as it adapts to reps and phases of training and so on. It adapts to the different system you use because we always use the same ones. So what I do with someone, like what I did with you, for example, I looked at what you did in the past, and then I gave you something that you were not familiar with at all. And then we start with that just to shock the system because it shocks the body. And that's when you're saying, oh, wow, I'm getting tons of progress again.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
In your
so that's what I look at.
Okay. In your experience, you've taught probably thousands of strength coaches for over the decades, and you were actually, you correct me if I'm wrong, but you were one of the ones you were the one who structured the PICP 1, 2, and 3. Is that right?
Yeah. Charles called me in 2007. And he basically, it was a long conversation, but basically what it was, he says, Andre, I need you to come in and structurize everything. So myself, John Connor, and Owen Lacey, we restructurize everything and we standardize everything from level 1 to level 4. Well, level 3 and 4 is basically me and John Connor. And level 1 to 2 is Owen and John and myself. So we restructured everything so that if you took the course in Australia or in London, in Canada, and the States, it would be the same thing. And I changed a few things. Before, there used to be like Olympic lifting. I took that out because I told Charles, I said, listen, the biggest problem for personal trainer is not because their clients have a sticking point with their power clean. The biggest problem is mostly back pain, or they just don't know how to move. So we got to do something to make them, teach them proper lifting technique. So we took that out. There's a few things I've changed. I had to argue with him quite a bit, but that's basically me.
Yeah.
So
obviously you've seen, and had a wealth of experience. What would you say sets a good coach apart from a great coach?
I think they care. A great coach will care. And a great coach will do the little bit, just a tiny bit more. It's going to be in the little things. Either pick up the weights or go get towels or make sure the client, if they're sick, are you taking the proper things to help your immune system? Are you maybe today we'll just do 2 sets or 3 sets instead of 5 sets. Being able to read the client and say, and then one other thing also is that it will be the coach that a great coach will assess their client every minute that they are with them. So when they do their lifting, they count the reps, they count the tempo, they look at how they lift, they look if they're starting to, because sometimes you can see, something's going on, the movement is different. Then you ask question, is it painful? And if they say, now if I go in that range, it hurts, so I'm just moving my elbow. Well, if it hurts, that's a red flag. You should be the coach will pay attention to that. A good coach might not pay attention to all those little details. That's the way I see it anyway. So it's the science of training and then the art. The science of coaching and then the art of coaching. And I think the great coach will be able to excel in both. And at the end of the day, you know what? The art of coaching is probably a bit more important.
What would you say, is one of the biggest things that, in terms of, you talk about the art of coaching, what is one of the biggest things that you've learned that has improved the art of your coaching?
Oh, boy. Improve my art of coaching. That's a good question.
Maybe, we can come back to it later.
No, it's just I'm just thinking. I mean, the thing is that I a long time ago I always believed that I do not know everything. That's number one. And I always try to learn a bit more. And I was, because of the sport of luge, when I became coach, well, even when you're sliding, you have to develop the skill of looking at things quickly and analyzing quickly. And so I think your art of coaching, you have to be willing to learn and open, not being closed-minded. That would be one. And two is to be able to, with your eyes, see how the movement is with your client, how they move, not only how heavy they lift, but how they move when they lift. And then you can decide, it's not, it's a whole bunch of different factors, but I think those are probably the biggest two, I would say.
Okay. And what would you say, in your opinion, moving on to a different topic again, how important would you say it is for an athlete to stay lean? And when we say lean, how do you define what lean is?
Well, lean for me is optimal body percentage body fat for the sport. And I know that some people, they say, you got to be as lean as possible, 4%, 5%. Me, I've learned from personal experience that it's not always true. Like, for example, in luge, or in winter sports, I think, in general, but luge, for this example, would be about 12%, anywhere from 10 to 12%. The reason why is if you need some protection from the climate. And for me, for example, when I was below 10%, I was always freezing on the start, and it would make my start, I would lose range of motion on the start movement, therefore lose power, lose also speed at the start. And if you lose speed at the start, well, that's a disadvantage at the finish, like I explained earlier. So for me, my best body fat was 12%. If you are a hockey player, or if you're maybe a rugby player, well, if it's warm, it's most of the time when you guys play rugby, it's pretty warm. It's not snowing. You can be below 10%. You can be 4%. It is true that the studies shown that the leaner you are, in theory, in general, you will be faster. But there is, between how much faster are you between 6 and 4%, I don't know. And I strongly believe also in the comfort of the athlete. Okay, if the athlete says, if he believes that at 8% he is the fastest, well, it will probably be the fastest. That's the one area that we always forget to look into. I think it's the psychology of the sport and psychology of the person. Mm. So you want to be lean, yes, but it will depend. For winter sport, like I said, I'm more lenient. If you're 12%, I will not blow a gasket. It's fine. If you perform well and you do your best, how can I argue?
Yeah.
But if a bodybuilder, well, of course you want to be 2%. If you can get there, but you don't body build outside in the winter storm, So
yeah, exactly.
So that's, So I would say it depends on the sport. In general, if it's not weather related, below 8% or around 8%. If it's weather related, you're outside mostly in the winter time, maybe 10 to 12% would be probably optimal.
Okay, and what do you think would be are the biggest hurdles as to why someone doesn't progress the way they think they should as it relates to their strength? What do you find are the biggest hurdles?
I think it goes back to what I said earlier, that they're doing the same thing. They're cycling the same system. So you got to do something that's totally different. You got to get out of the box. And even if you say, well, doing 8-8-16 for hypertrophy doesn't make sense. 8-8-16 is strength endurance. Mm. But as your training age increases, I tend to believe, I didn't see any study on this, but that's my own experience, that you will, and I've seen it with this one person I was coaching. That guy gained, I think he gained 2 pounds of muscle mass. I could be wrong on that one, but it was at 2 pounds, I think, of muscle mass with an 8-8-16. Mm. It's 2 or 3 pounds. It's around there. And for him to gain that much, he's at the time he was probably training for 12, 13 years, and it was the biggest gains he've made in years. And then that's why I told Werner, I said, listen, buddy, I said, do things that you have not done before, and then you'll see how much difference it will make to your body.
That's always the value of getting a good coach, is that they can bring that flavor all year round to your training. Yeah, definitely. And what are your thoughts on training on feel? I know in the bodybuilding community, at least, there's a big notion that, you don't really need structured programs or any of that stuff. Just get in the gym and, train the body part that you feel you need to and do what you feel. What's your opinion on that?
Well, that's kind of something I've never heard about.
Oh, really?
I never. Because I always was in a structured training. Now, but thinking about it, I think once in a while it won't hurt you, but on the long term, I think it would be detrimental. And I think that would be, and I could be totally talking right through my hat here, but that's some things you would see where you see people that are not symmetrical. Not necessarily from left to right, but from body part to body part, like arms to. Because because from my experience, I know what I don't feel like training. Like I know I hate doing split squats once in a while, and I wouldn't. Yeah. So if I go only by feel, I would never do any calf raise because I hate doing calf raise with passion, and I would probably not do as much split squats as I should. So I think you would miss body parts.
Definitely. And just what are some of your personal favorite training methods to use with yourself and use with your clients? Well,
lately I will say I'll use the one I designed, the Herdna program that you've done. So it's basically you do your A1, A2 is 6 to 8 reps, 30 seconds rest, and then B1, B2 you do 2 to 4 with 2 minutes rest. And C1, C2 again, 6 to 8 reps with 30 seconds rest, so like limited rest. So that's a good one. I've got some good gains in hypertrophy and strength with that one, depending who's doing it. For strength, to gain strength, I like the 1-6 method. I think you've done that one too.
Yeah, I've done that, but I did it when I was not fully recovered, so I didn't get as good gains.
Yeah. But the thing is with this, and with that system, for example, the first time you do it, you gain the most. That's when you'll gain the most amount of strength. After that, not so much. You will, good strength gain, but never as good as the first time you do it. That's why it's important. I think the first time you do it, you're ready to do it.
And one thing that you would advise with when training like a 6-1 method, you'd always suggest that number one, you never want to miss any lifts, and also number two, that you don't always train at 100%. You train more like 98, 97%, or is it to the point where you do completely fry the nervous system?
With the 1-6 system, you will. Well, you want to do. You want to work to failure. So. Is it 98%? Yeah, maybe. But at the end, what happened on your 6th set or 5th set, when you push your one rep of your, at the time 1 RM, it's not possible to do a true 1 RM because it always changes. So, when you say it's about 95, 98%, it's probably there. Yeah.
Right.
But you want to go. The important thing is that you cannot do a second rep. That's what I asked for. So if you put a weight that you can do for 3. If you do it for 1 rep, but you can actually do 3 reps with it, well then you're wasting time. You should be putting a weight that you can do for 1 rep. And then that's when the microplating becomes really important. Because sometimes you'll be able to add half a pound or half a kilo, a quarter of a kilo, or a kilo,
Yeah.
So that's why it's important to have your microplating when you do that, because you do want to. And then when you do your 6 reps, well, you want to be able to die at 6, either technically or strength-wise.
Definitely. Well, moving on, I know you've got so much information to share, obviously, through years and years of coaching and, obviously being an athlete yourself. I want to play a game, which is essentially I'm going to say a word, and you're just going to give me either a one-word or a sentence statement on your opinion of each. So say, for example, if I was to say something like, or if someone was to say to me, muscle magazines, I would say toilet paper. As the response, right? So, yeah, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
CrossFit.
Unbelievably great system, great ideas. Sadly, not always applied properly.
Okay. Structural balance testing.
Very important.
Not training to a tempo.
Not training.
Not training to a tempo. So training.
That's my answer. Not
training. Oh, okay. Personal trainers in Australia.
Like anywhere else in the world, buddy. Some are really good, some are really not so good.
Best books on nutrition.
I'll go with Precision Nutrition from, I forgot his name now.
John Berardi?
John Berardi, there you go.
Best books on training or author?
Best book on training. Okay, this one, Okay, so I like the old books, Bill Pearl, Arnold. I think they're classics. They still have good ideas in there. I think for the modern strength coach, and it's not because I know the guy, because it's just Charles Poliquin Level 1, I think is really good. The only other guy who actually was able to capture the same simplicity system was John Paul Catanzaro. Cantanzaro, and his book is The Elite Trainer, I believe. Yeah.
Supplements?
They're good.
Why some strength coaches suck?
Because they think they're good.
Why do some strength coaches succeed?
Because they think they don't know everything.
What sets athletes apart?
Commitment, dedication.
An athlete that you admire?
Rick Hansen. He's a wheelchair athlete in Canada. He's probably one of the guys out of them. Yeah.
Hardest sport athletically?
Pole vaulting. Pole vaulting.
Oh, okay. Someone you would love to coach?
Anybody who wants to train seriously and wants to improve themselves. I don't know, someone I'd love to coach.
What about the wheelchair guy? Have you coaching him, or is?
No, he's the guy. He went around the world in, I can't remember what year, to raise money for spinal injuries. And he basically, that man alone made me change my mind about people in wheelchair and people with disabilities. Yeah. And I think what he did was unbelievable. To go around the world, he literally went around the world. He rolled. I mean, obviously, he took a boat or a plane to cross the seas, but still, it's. I think he and I always admire what he did and how he did it.
Awesome. What's a career highlight for you?
My career highlight was conquering my fear of losing. Not too many people know this, but it's basically. If you ask me, people ask me, well, the Olympics, do they define you? The Olympics, they don't define me, but that single moment in my life, conquering my fear, actually defines me.
So do you just want to elaborate on that one? You conquered, so you obviously luged every day when you were training.
Yeah, but we learn. Make a long story short. Basically, I started sliding, and they rushed us to go to the top. I remember in 1984 when I started sliding, Paul Hildegarner, who was the gold medalist at the '84 Olympics in Sarajevo, was at the ladies' start, getting his feeling back, and I was at men's start. I had no feelings about nothing, You might have to believe this, but I have no feeling about fuck all. Okay, I had not a clue what I was doing, and I was at men's start after 3 days, and the Olympic champion was at lady start. And the last training day of that first week, there was a really bad crash from a Canadian guy. And he was hospitalized, almost died, and it was a long story anyway. But he lived, but he paid the cost physically. He never came back to the sport of luge, and I never saw him afterwards. And that Christmas, when I came back for Christmas, I told the coach, I said, listen, either you let me do my own progression sliding, my own learning pace, or I will quit now. So it took me about 3-4 weeks, and then because I said to myself, I cannot quit this sport because of fear. Like I have to at least conquer my fear, and then I'll quit. That was my goal, to conquer my fear, and then I was going to say, this is crazy sport. I remember after my first run, I said, what am I doing with this stupid sport, And I conquered my fear, and then once you have no more. I mean, it's not that I had no more fear. I shouldn't say that. I was able to tame it, if you want, and I was always aware that that's probably why I became a fairly good slider fairly quick, is because the fear was always there, but I was able to understand it and kind of control it. And once I was able to do that, I said, well, geez, might as well keep on going. Mm. But I was like, I can't tell people I've known fear. Like couldn't eat, like the point where you don't eat. I lost I think it was 12 pounds wow. before Christmas anyway. So yeah. And then after that, once I conquered that, I knew I could do anything.
Okay.
It was pretty.
And what that was the process of conquering that fear. That was just a matter of, you said you did your own progressions or visualization or a combination of everything, really.
Yeah, it was a bit of a visualization that I've learned from judo, and a bit of also just concentration from judo and gymnastic, whatever. Little tricks that coaches, that little things you say when they give it to you at the time, you're saying, what the heck, what is this? And then I realized after that, when I was in the luge sport, I was like, holy cow, okay, now I got to do this stuff, the breathing, and then just going at my own pace. So they would, send people up to the top right away. I would tell my coach, I'm staying at lady start. I have to learn to do the sport first, to steer and control the stupid sled, then I'll go up. Wow. And because of what happened to this guy, at the beginning of the season, she didn't really argue. She kind of let me, and I was progressing really good, I think. And after a while, I've noticed that the guys would go up to the men's start less quicker. They would stay at ladies start with me because my coach could see that I was progressing pretty quick. And then, yeah.
Five more of the rapid questions.
Sure.
Squat or deadlift?
Deadlift.
Oh, really? Deadlift?
Yeah. Yep. Snatch grip deadlift. On top of that, snatch grip deadlift. The best exercise you can have. The biggest bang for your buck.
One thing you're sick of seeing in strength training and fitness?
I think I'm sick of seeing strength training and fitness. People telling me that doing low rep is going to make you big. I still hear this to this day. It's unbelievable.
Yeah. What did you train today?
Nothing.
No. Best, that's an easy one. Best training partner that you've had?
Stéphane Cazot. He's the guy he was at the...
I met Stéphane.
Yeah, Stéphane is probably the guy I probably made the most... Well, obviously Charles, I was training with him, but Charles, I was always scared to... When I would coach with him, it would be I'd be more nervous than my Olympics. And I'm not joking. But Stéphane was more... He's the guy who brought me to 8% body fat.
Okay. He's coached you. He's worked with you for a while, or?
I was working with him when I was at the Central Institute for Human Performance in St. Louis. I was the director of the center there for a while, and then that's how I met him. And there's a guy. That guy is extremely knowledgeable, and I have a lot of respect for him. Like, he is top-notch knowledge guy. He's unbelievable. Like, he's my resource guy. If I don't know something, I'll email him. Hey, do you have any studies on this?
Yeah,
Yeah, very, very knowledgeable.
Drug testing in the Olympics.
Oh, my God. Good attention, but not too useful. In a sense that they don't, it's really difficult to catch the guys that know what they're doing. So I'm not against it. It's just that I wish they could catch everybody, honestly. I wish they could, but it's excessively difficult.
Yeah. Why do you think it's getting more excessively difficult these days?
Because they understand more and more the body, and they have customized drugs now. So unless you have the original sample, it's almost impossible to test. Right. They can look at the levels of testosterone, but the doctors are getting smart. Like, they're ahead of the curve all the time. They know what to do, and it's big money, eh? So whenever there's big money,
yeah. And I had to finish on this one. I remember you telling me a story about protein powders, but what's your thing on protein powders? If you want to share the story about how you used to think that the protein powders were doping.
Yeah, okay. Because in 1988, after Ben Johnson got busted for his Olympics, but even before that, the Canadian Olympic Committee, they had a fear campaign. So they would tell all the athletes that no matter what you take, you test positive. So if you take carbs, you might test positive. If you take, and I'm not lying at all. Like, if you take protein, you might test positive. If you take creatine, I remember at the time, creatine, 100% sure they're going to test positive, which is not possible. It's impossible, but still, they would tell us this. So I'd be freaking out. And then I remember Charles, I never took anything at all because I was scared I was going to test positive. And I didn't know much about all that stuff. I still don't know much about all that stuff. But Charles, one time with training, and I was tired, and it was it was Northern Lights, and is this carb drink and then Charles added protein to it, and that thing tastes like cardboard. But anyway, Charles told me, he goes, drink this. And I said, no, I don't want to drink this. I'm going to test positive. And Charles got angry at me. He goes, if you do not drink this shake, I will punch your fucking lights out. And when he gets angry, that's the only time he really got angry with me. And then, so I drank it, and then because I was scared, I drank it. And then the second time Charles almost punched me is because the next day I came to see him, I did training, and I go, why? I feel great with this stuff. And Charles looked at me, he goes, oof. So after that, I started drinking carbs and protein shake. But I remember the first because then we would be tested almost, like I got tested in 88, 89, 90, like almost every 4 or 6 weeks. It was unbelievable. And I remember the first time I peed in the cup after I was taking my shakes. I'm like, oh my God, I hope I don't test positive. I hope I don't test positive. Even though there's absolutely no way I would. And I know I didn't, because it's just carbs and protein. So, and that's all I took, people think that I took like BCAAs and all that stuff. From 1988, 1992, the biggest supplements I took was I took creatine, I think, for 2 drinks, and I was freaking out too much. The rest was always, the rest was always protein and carbs.
All right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So tell us, what are you currently working on?
Courses. I'm designing courses now for this man in Quebec. So I got another level 1, level 2 for strength coaches, how to coach and understanding different parameters and different aspects of coaching, either rep sets and how to build a program, to all the way to how to move. I got hypertrophy. People call them hypertrophy boot camp, but I call them hypertrophy academies. It's because you learn how to do it. You learn how to write programs for a good hypertrophy. And I'm also working with Kevin Darby right now with the Darby Training Systems, which I think is unbelievable. He did his own course, and I'm helping him teaching it, because I think it's a very, very good system he has, and the way he teach. It's very, very good. So
that's in Canada?
Him. Yeah, in Canada, but I'm trying to bring him to Australia.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
And because I think it's a good really good tools because he teaches you. He talks about movement, which is actually unbelievable. It's almost unheard of. There's him and Tom Quedrington that really talk about that I know of. There might be other people. Don't get mad at me, but I don't know everybody in the world. And Kevin, he talks about how teach people how to move. I always tell people when I taught, I always told them, learn how to lift, learn how to train, and then train hard. And Kevin, basically, he goes, learn how to move, learn to train, and then train hard. So it's good for a beginner. It's really good for someone who just comes into the world of personal training. And I think, but even people that have been personal trainers and strength coach, I think you can still gain quite a bit from. Because for me, for example, when I first took the course with Kevin, I was like, wow, this is stuff I forgot. Like maybe I should be paying more attention. Because the biggest problem we have in Canada now is that we have young athletes. Young kids, they want to become athletes, and they don't know how to run. They don't know how to lift, like move an arm properly. They have total dysfunction between the scapula and the humerus movement, and it's horrible. That's our problem because I think in Canada our problem is we took a lot of physical activities out of school.
Yeah,
I don't know if it's the same thing in Australia, but it's becoming more and more of a problem.
Yeah, tell us about your new facility.
It's a Canadian Center for Strength Conditioning. It's on a farm, actually, in Airdrie, just beside Calgary, Alberta. And basically, it's a center that I just started 2 years ago, a year and a half ago. And it's good equipment. I don't have tons of equipment, but I have good equipment. And I'm training now at the moment. I have my mom's group that I call. So it's moms. They come every night almost from 7 to 8. And they do a lot of modified training system. For them, it's mostly fat loss or weight management, I should say. And then I have also young hockey players that I'm coaching.
Very good. And are you available online for if any strength coaches or personal trainers who are looking for someone to write their programs? Are you available at all for that?
Yeah. They can contact me at ccsccalgary@me.com, and they just write at that email, and then they can contact me. My wife is basically my manager, so. They'll get in contact with my wife first, and then, as you know, and then she relays the message. She's good. She keeps me online.
Yeah, very good. And if people want to connect to you, where would you say the best place to go? Do you have a Facebook page?
Yeah, Canadian Center for Strength and Conditioning. That's my Facebook page. That's probably the best way to go. And once again, my wife goes there a lot more than me, and then she will tell me, "Hey, get your butt in gear and go answer this guy or whatever." So I go once. I do go on Facebook, but she's the one who really is in. She's the manager.
Very good, excellent. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure today picking your brain about obviously strength training and your experiences. Thank you very much for your time. I'm sure everyone will get a lot of value out of this interview, and we wish you all the best.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, and good job.
Thank you. So there it is, guys. As you can really tell from this podcast, Andre Benoit is absolutely world-class, working with some of the best in strength and conditioning and teaching all over the world. Like his Facebook page, it's the Canadian Centre for Strength and Conditioning. That's where his Facebook is. As always, guys, you can check us out at enterprisefitness.com.au, and to our international listeners and readers and followers, it's with an S, not a Z. The Australian spelling is slightly different, so Enterprise is spelt with an S. And as I said at the start of this podcast, you can check us out. Our next internship program is coming up on November the 14th, 15th, and 16th. And just a brief overview about that program. That program's obviously with me. It's run at my private facility at Enterprise Fitness in Melbourne. It's 3 days. There's 7 sessions over the 3 days. The course is for personal trainers and people who are seriously into their fitness and considering a a career in fitness. And basically the first day is all about training systems, how essentially we run training systems at Enterprise Fitness. The second day is our nutrition systems, and what trainers walk away with when they really finish our programs is essentially the why. Why do we subscribe, or why do we use certain methods? And the third day is all on business development, and there's 3 training sessions on that day. As always, guys, these podcasts are there for the love of it, so I would be ever so grateful if you could share these with your friends on Facebook, really get the word out. These podcasts are kind of my gift, I suppose, for lack of a better word, in contribution to the internet, because I know there's a lot of garbage on the internet, and I've had some fantastic guests on this show, from Johnny Bowden, Dr. John DeMartini, obviously Andre Benoit today. We had Derek Woodsky a couple of weeks ago. We had Mark Schaus almost over a year ago, Dr. Thomas O'Brien, Leah Keith. The list goes on and on and on. T.S. Wiley, who was awesome. Dr. Ottobre, who wrote the New Evolution Diet. That's a really great interview, that one. So, it's maximusmark.com/radio. It's also on iTunes. If you can leave a review on iTunes, even better. Anyway, guys, if you have any questions, contact me at my Facebook page, which is Enterprise Fitness. Speak to you guys on the next podcast.